When we get into Trump derangement, I shut off, and it's just a waste of time.
I think derangement, the term derangement, is usually something levied at people when they don't have a cogent argument to counter the arguments I'm making.
In this video from Piers Morgan, Scott Galloway debates Kevin O'Leary, specifically in this clip about Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I have been so impressed with Scott Galloway, who just shreds Kevin O'Leary and Piers Morgan's arguments about what great guys Trump and Musk are, and looks at the actual facts. Why don't we watch this together? I'll have some opinions, and then I want to know what you think in the comments section.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, Scott was referencing there an appearance by Bono on Joe Rogan. We've got a clip from that. Then I'll ask you a question off the back of this.
Just recent report. It's not proven, but the surveillance enough suggests 300,000 people have already died from just this cut off, this hard cut of USAID. So there's food rotting in boats, in warehouses.
Now, as he said there, Kevin, Bono, he doesn't know for sure that that figure is correct, but there's certainly mounting concern that a lot of people are being directly impacted health-wise, including people who may die as a consequence of these cuts that have been made. Musk has responded on X. He branded Bono such a liar stroke idiot. He said 0 people have died as a result of USAID cuts. In a later exchange, he says South Park lampooned Bono as the biggest shit in the world, and they were right. So he's fired into Bono, but the dramatic cessation of much of what USAID did, surely, I mean, inevitably, would have impacted significantly on things like public health, wouldn't it?
Yes, and I can't refute some of the facts that Scott has detailed there in terms of just the data. But you could have looked at that data decades ago when there was found some poison in a Tylenol bottle and seen a total collapse in that brand in a matter of 6 weeks. And today it's 10x what it used to be. And so there are periods of any brand where they go into crisis. But if there's merit to the product and it solves a pain point, they tend to recover. And I would argue that's going to happen in the case of Tesla. Because let me ask a question from 30,000 feet. If you look at the controversy, and there's no question Elon Musk is a very controversial individual. There is just no question about that. But then you set that aside and say, can we look at the track record of executional skills on mandate he is elected to take on, whether that be SpaceX or Starlink or Tesla or anything he's touched? He's the most remarkable individual. And I used to say this about Steve Jobs, who I worked for, that he was 80% signal and 20% noise. In other words, in any given day, as Jobs used to tell me, I'm going to get the 5 things I have to get done, and I will not let noise get in the way in this 18-hour cycle, and you should follow me and do the same. And that worked for him. Look at what he achieved. Then you look at Elon Musk, and I'd argue to anybody listening, Elon is the only individual that I've ever met that's 100% signal. He does not even deal with noise. I've watched him walk away, and I've used this example countless times because I've seen it. He'll walk away from a conversation. The second he thinks it's a waste of his time, he's not garnering any information that's useful. And he's very awkward socially. But look at what that man has achieved. And he's only 50% through being the modern day Da Vinci, if you want to call him that. There's nobody on earth that's achieved as much as he has. And of course, that's going to draw criticism, whether it comes from a rock star that wants to be a politician. I love U2 music, but I don't listen at all to Bono's politics. I don't think he spends a lot of time worrying about it until he's talking on air. I'd rather he write music that I can enjoy. I'd rather listen to what Musk has to say in terms of moving forward on these mandates that solve huge problems for mankind. Where would the Ukrainian soldiers be without Starlink?
Yeah.
So many things right there. Kevin O'Leary basically saying, I wish the celebrity would just shut up. His opinion doesn't mean anything. Let's make the music. We'll listen to the music, right? You're a billionaire. You have no experience in politics. Why are you the authority and Bono's not? Bono's been working in politics as a fundraiser and an activist his entire career. Where have you been? You just got in here because you were a billionaire, dude. Another thing. What about Starlink and Ukraine? Give me a break. As though this administration is supporting Ukraine. We all know what's going on. That's precisely Scott Galloway's point, is you can't cherry pick the good and ignore the bad. And you can't look at the good, no matter how good, and say, well, it just blanket justifies everything else.
Where would people be without Teslas that provide incredible value for the dollar in the low-cost versions? Or what about SpaceX? Will we get to Mars? Well, if we are, it's going to be because of Elon Musk.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was standing with him in the line to meet President Trump and the Emir of Qatar in Doha 2 weeks ago at the state dinner. And it was before Elon asked me what we were all doing lining up. And I said, we're going to meet Donald Trump for a handshake. And he laughed and went, I do that every day. I went, I know. I don't even know why you're standing here. Anyway, he thought it'd be funny to carry on standing there. And when he got to Trump, they both burst out laughing. But notwithstanding that, he was bored and he pulled out his phone and began showing me and a couple of other people just on his phone the Optimus humanoid robots and where they've got to. And they were dancing in this video clip. And it was one of the most extraordinary things I've seen. And he said, these are going to be the biggest thing in the world within 15 years. And everyone's going to have one, or rich people will want 10. And they're going to change the world. They're going to do every boring thing in the world you could possibly wish them to do. And he had a kind of boyish enthusiasm for this technology. And that made me just look at him and think, why do you need all the aggravation of politics? It's like it's brought him so much aggravation. And yet, as you said, Kevin, he's a genius, really, in many other ways. I mean, do you accept, Scott, that he's a genius, or do you feel it's smoke and mirrors with Musk? Because when I watched him talk me through his Optimus thing, I just saw the 10-year-old boy who used to write programs doing it on a massive scale and loving that. Whereas I think he's really struggled with the criticism he's had in the political arena.
I don't think you can deny his genius. I'll use Starlink on my flight to London in a couple of days, and it's a superior product. I owned a Tesla. But somehow we've decided in America that innovation and money replaces or obviates or excuses depravity. Cutting off aid to HIV-positive mothers, deciding what veterans should get benefits, cutting off SNAP payments, which have shown to have a positive net return when people run out of money for food at the end of the month. I mean, I think one of the wonderful things about being an American, and quite frankly, for me, what it means to be a man and what I try to teach my boys, is the whole point of prosperity is such that you can protect people. And I think the two of you are more impressed with Mr. Musk than I am. I think if somebody is making Nazi salutes, if somebody is being sued concurrently by two women for sole custody of their child because that person has not spent any time with that child, when someone is so severely addicted to drugs they can't get their shit together to show up to the White House without looking exceptionally high, I don't think that's the right role model for young men. So what I would ask to all of us is look at what money has done to us. That if someone can land a rocket on metal scissors or create a great AV, he's a genius. He's the wealthiest man in the world. But does that mean we should excuse depravity? Does that mean, unlike Bill Gates, he's not using his billions to help people? He's not planting trees, the shade of which he won't sit under? I think this is an individual who has literally come off the tracks, who is rabidly addicted to drugs, and is using his immense power to get people elected, and that too many of us excuse what is abhorrent behavior. I think his legacy is not going to be an EV or putting rockets into space. I think it's going to be unnecessary death, disease, and disability of the world's most vulnerable. That is not what it means to be an innovator. It's not what it means to be an American. It's not what it means to be a man.
Wow. Kevin, what do you say to that?
That's a tough criticism. And that's certainly the kind of controversy that surrounds him and has almost since he came on the scene at the PayPal days. He has distractors. Scott's one of them. I get it. I would have kept that. There's a concept now that I deal with every day called Trump derangement syndrome internationally when I have to work in Abu Dhabi or in Zurich. And I get into a meeting and they want to go into a diatribe about Trump. And I say, this is a useless use of time. I'm not here to debate politics. I'm here to debate policy because we don't make money in politics as investors. We make money with policy. So if we could just use our valuable time together to look at the policy and see if there's an investment opportunity together. But I can't, and I don't care to get into debating Trump derangement syndrome. But what you just heard there from Scott is Musk derangement syndrome. And I get it. And I think it's fair that he has those criticisms. But it doesn't distract or take away from the achievements the man has made so far and will make. And I'm an advocate for executional excellence because in the end, if you burn your calories trying to change someone who you know is not going to change and don't focus on the output that he can provide and the great solutions for mankind he has provided and hopefully will with robotics you talked about, then you are in the form of being dominated and controlled by a derangement syndrome. That's my opinion. And I've so far avoided that and I work a lot in Washington now. And, I'm very, very fortunate to be able to work on a bipartisan basis because I represent entrepreneurship and job creation for small business. And that's bipartisan. Even AOC and Elizabeth Warren want to support that. And I can have my narratives with them. But when we get into Trump derangement, I shut off. And it's just a waste of time. And I think that's a waste of time criticizing, that he's not a man. I mean, I just find that, and I respect Scott. I mean, I respect his opinion. I respect all opinions, but let's burn our calories moving the needle forward is my view.
Kevin O'Leary is saying personalities don't matter. Let's focus on policy. And Scott Galloway is saying the policy sucks, right? Let's look at the policy. We're talking about the policy. I would also argue that personalities do matter. If nothing else, the greatest job of the President of the United States is to lead with character, to represent the character of the American people.
I would also add to that, Scott. I think you make some very valid points about USAID, and I really want to see the data on that when it comes in, is to see exactly what the bottom line impact has been. And if it is anywhere near the levels that you and Bono think it's going to be or is being, it's clearly going to be appalling. But I would say on the derangement syndrome aspect of Musk and Trump, they both attract a huge amount of support and plaudits and aggro and so on. You referenced there that he did a Nazi salute. And I don't think you actually think he did a Nazi salute. For a moment. I mean, I'll ask you, but I don't think you do. And the other day, Cory Booker did exactly the same thing on stage, literally almost exactly the same thing. And all the people who had leapt on Elon Musk and said, he's a Nazi, did a Nazi salute, blah, 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 they all said the complete opposite about Cory Booker, simply because he was a Democrat. He was one of their tribe. Therefore, when he did almost exactly the same arm movement on a stage, he was not a Nazi. And I think that's where I would agree with Kevin, that sometimes it's the double standard which lends succor to the concept of derangement syndrome. Do you accept that?
I think derangement, the term derangement, is usually something levied at people when they don't have a cogent argument to counter the arguments I'm making. I would call myself someone who's been infected with democracy addiction syndrome and is allergic to the type of depravity that these individuals are demonstrated.
So I think this conversation is really interesting. I've done another video on this where they get more into Cory Booker and Elon Musk and that gesture, that salute, right? And we also take a look at Steve Bannon's clip from CPAC. So if that's of interest to you, take a look at that clip. It's from the same Piers Morgan video with Scott Galloway and Kevin O'Leary. I think it's pretty disingenuous of Piers Morgan and Kevin O'Leary, who are smart guys but are also rich guys. Scott Galloway, by the way, very rich guy too. But what Scott Galloway says is such common sense to me that all of the kind of like, well, you can't look at everything and, it's not all as it appears, seems wildly disingenuous And Piers Morgan and Kevin O'Leary are buddies of Trump and friends of Musk, and they just fawn and glaze. And they're just like, oh, they're playing four-dimensional chess. I mean, they really have everyone's best interest at heart. If so, why not be transparent about it? Why the rush? Why the crypto coin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Why the convictions? It's absurd. It's absurd. Maybe he's a great guy to have dinner with. I don't know, man. But you got to judge a person by their track record of what they do and not whether or not they're a great golf buddy. Even that is difficult for me to imagine. Maybe I'm being a curmudgeonly prick. I don't know. If you think that I'm being unfair to Piers Morgan, or I'm not smart enough to understand Kevin O'Leary's points, or maybe you think Scott Galloway is some sort of a grifter, let me know in the comments. But I think you've got a fair amount of convincing to do. Let me know in the comments.